Welcome to Voyage Clinics Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Shaunna Sanders. Today, my guest is my number one favorite guest. I've said that a few times, but this one is actually true. This is my wife, Shaunna Sanders. Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Shaunna joins us from Mapleton, Utah. She is, her background, so she has an undergrad in English from SUU. She then went on to get a master's at UNLV. We call it UN Love. And that's where I met her. And she wasn't my professor, but she was teaching there. After the master's,
in English.
In English, yes. Was teaching for Princeton Review, LSAT prep stuff, and did really well on the LSAT and was looking to go to law school. We ended up getting married, and I was fine to support you in law school, but you decided to have a family, which I was happy to support you in that as well. So 4 children later, I went to med school and residency, and Shaunna circled back on law school. And so that was what, 5 years,
7 years ago, 7.5.
No.
When I started law school.
Oh, when you started.
2017.
That's true. Mm-hmm. 7.5 years ago,
Yep.
Pursued a law degree and at BYU, and part of the way through it decided this is not hard enough. I need something more challenging. Added an MBA to it, and just a brilliant mind. So thank you for coming on. Did I do your introduction
I'm happy to be
justice?
Here. You did my introduction justice.
She's also an author and a poet and
I don't
a mother.
want our listeners to think that the JD was not hard enough, or the law school to think that the JD was not hard enough.
Oh, that's true. That was hard.
It just worked out because if you're in the law program, then there's joint degrees you can do that it takes less time if you do them at the same time. So that's why we decided to do the MBA in addition to the law school.
So in our podcast today, I thought I would highlight your journey. I think you're among the most brilliant minds I've ever met. And I think it would be neat to just hear kind of from your standpoint, thoughts on the hero's journey. I remember you telling me this when we were very first dating, and it was lost on me because I was a science guy and you were an English gal. And so I'm like, I don't know what that means. But I think your hero's journey, as I better understand it now, is quite beautiful. And I'd love to hear from your standpoint, maybe introduce hero's journey, what that means. And then maybe we can go into your journeys in, you had 3 of our children at home birthing, and then, your thoughts in some of those spaces, and then also in pursuing education. And I'm going ahead of myself. I'm like
That's
5 steps ahead. So let's start with the hero's journey, and then let's talk about what was it that you pursued education, and what that was, what drove you that direction.
Okay, so the hero's journey comes from a mythologist named Joseph Campbell. He wrote a really well-known book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and he studied mythologies around the world, and he identified certain archetypes, which is like an archetype is like a type of person that shows up. So there's always there's often a trickster figure in mythology, or there's a hero, obviously, or there's a femme fatale or whatever. So there's these different kinds of characters that show up repeatedly in mythology. And his book studied the hero as an archetype in mythology, and it's very fascinating. And it kind of speaks to our humanity, that the hero, regardless of what culture's mythology you're learning about, the hero goes through the same journey every time, whether it's Gilgamesh, in old Mesopotamia, or Beowulf in England, or, Joseph of Egypt in the Bible. Like, all of those heroes go through the same journey. And so his work, Joseph Campbell's work, was talking about how that archetypal hero's journey influences and comments on our own journey through mortality, through being alive. And so the hero's journey, and there are a lot of mini steps in it, but I always just sort of condensed it into 6 steps. the first step is that the hero is called to adventure. Sometimes that might be a willing call, and sometimes it's a little bit of a nudge out of the nest. So, for example, let's just take Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors, right? This is a well-known story. Joseph, the son of Jacob, his call to adventure was when his brothers threw him in a pit and sold him to some Ishmaelites.
That seems like a great way to be called into an adventure.
That is definitely called into an adventure. And
us going to med school, law school, or,
Right.
or
Yeah.
even going off to college is a baby
Exactly.
hero's journey. Yeah.
Some heroes willingly undertake this journey. Like in the Odyssey, Telemachus, which is Odysseus' son, he kind of hems and haws a little bit, but at some point he's like, no, I need to go look for my father. And so he leaves home and he goes on this adventure. Mm-hmm. He heard that call and he answered it. And we all have different calls to adventure in our journey. So after being called to the adventure, the next step in the hero's journey is always meeting the mentor. So we can just stick with the Odyssey. Telemachus met several different people, but Nestor was one of the people that he met that kind of like guided him. Nestor had been with Odysseus when they were sacking Troy and coming home, and so he could give him some information about his father, and he could tell him some places to go, and he could give him some guidance, right?
So it
along
might
the
be
way.
like in college, it might be a classmate, it might be a professor or a mentor,
Sure.
somebody who kind of guides you along your
Yep.
journey.
Yep. In Harry Potter, it's Dumbledore, right? Dumbledore is the mentor.
Sure.
Or in The Hobbit, it's Gandalf. He's definitely a mentor. So I think it's important to like be on the alert for those people who can be your mentors. And it doesn't necessarily need to be an old man with a gray white beard, right?
But it's cooler if it is.
It's really cool if it is, but be open to the possibility of mentors in a lot of the people that you meet. And in some
Unexpected
ways,
mentors.
yeah, you can find mentoring in a lot of different people, not just one person.
And we can be a mentor.
And we can absolutely be a mentor to those around us, yeah.
I'm growing my beard out for that purpose, actually.
Really?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, so call to adventure, meet the mentor, encounter obstacles. In every hero's journey, there is always like challenges, right? Boulders in the path, or, you get sold into Egypt and then like you get into the house of Potiphar and guess what? You're thrown into jail again because Potiphar's wife accuses you of something you didn't do, right? And so there's always these obstacles. It's never that the hero's like, okay, I'm going to take up my sword and I'm just going to go and fight the dragon and win and be done, right? I mean, Bilbo has to encounter the trolls before he even gets close to the lonely mountain where Smaug is marauding. And so those obstacles are kind of like our trial runs, right? They're our chance to test our mettle and to recognize where we're falling short, what skills we can shore up, and what our strengths are too.
Yeah.
Those obstacles can often show us our strengths.
That could be like the classes that you take in college or med school
Sure.
or any number of things. I'm just thinking applying this like in I think of as a mother's hero journey just in childbirth, right? Like embarking in that adventure.
Contractions are the obstacles. The call to adventure, you don't get to choose that.
Seems like the obstacles only continue after birth though, like breastfeeding.
No,
and
we'll get
sleepless
back to
nights.
this. We'll get back to this. Okay, so there's always going to be obstacles. And I think that it's helpful to know that, like when you're encountering challenges in your chosen path, and you recognize, like, oh, this isn't easy. I thought it would be easier. This is really difficult. That's part of the journey, actually. Mm-hmm. And you're not a hero if you don't encounter obstacles. Mm. So that's something to maybe buoy you up in those times when you're like, these are way too big. I cannot climb over them. I can't go around them. I can't go through them. Like, what am I going to do, right? That means you're a hero. You just have to persevere. Okay.
That's your argument for natural childbirth as well.
Well, let's save that till the end. Okay, so encounter obstacles. The next one is fulfilling the quest. Now, this is step 4, and we still have 6 steps, right? Wow. So at step 4, we've fulfilled the quest. whether that is to, get the golden fleece from Jason, or whether, that's to find your father, which is, Odysseus, Telemachus finds Odysseus. Whatever it is, the hero fulfills the quest that he or she set out to accomplish. So you get your degree, right?
You have the baby.
You have the baby.
You finish med school. You finish law school. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we still have 2 more steps after that. After fulfilling the quest, then we have to go back home. You can't just you can't climb to the top of the mountain and be given the 10 commandments and then stay there. That's not going to help anyone, right?
Sure.
It's not going to change you as a person.
You can't stay in the hospital after you deliver the baby.
Right. You can't. You have to return home.
Yeah.
So that's step 5 is the return of the hero. Step 6 kind of goes along with step 5 because you return with something. And in each case, the hero, after enduring these obstacles and making it through, fulfilling the quest, turning around and coming home, the hero brings with him or her something that infuses new life into the community. So Telemachus brought his dad back, Odysseus back, to take over, to run the suitors out of town. What did Bilbo Baggins, right? He brought back peace. His nephew Frodo brought back, peace. He threw the ring into Mordor and he brought back this new life for the community in the Shire. And so in a very real way, then that segues nicely into how childbirth is a hero's journey. You literally bring a new life into the world.
And bring them back home.
Yeah, you bring them back home. So that's the hero's journey is not complete until you come back home with that thing that you learned. Sometimes it's knowledge.
Yeah. Sometimes
it's, a changed perspective. But it's something that will help your community be better than it was when you left.
That's super cool. Is there one more step?
Nope, that's it. That's 6.
I'm not a mathematician.
It's okay.
It's a doctor.
Yeah.
So I think this is so cool. And I would love for you to just discuss a little bit about how this is one way that learning and education has enriched your life, just understanding these processes like this. And can you speak to education? What is it that made you kind of pursue education and passionate about it? And then what has it done for your life to enrich your life? And it is truly, you've embarked on multiple hero's journeys in education with your undergrad, with your master's, and with, your JD MBA. And what were some of the take-home points that you how did it enrich your life, and what was it that made you pursue it?
Yeah. I think I've always felt called to be a teacher. And that's not necessarily as, a profession where, you teach an English 10-10 class, or you teach, math 20-10 or whatever, but to share the knowledge that I have gained with those around me so that they can benefit from the same knowledge and widen perspective and understanding that I've gained. And so when I pursue education, there's a career goal maybe behind the education, but there's always also a voracious appetite for understanding that I can gain with the purpose of sharing that with other people. And it's just part of my core identity, I guess, is that when I was in undergrad, I flip-flopped between math and English a lot. I couldn't decide if I wanted to major in math and minor in English, or major in English and minor in math. And I know that sounds weird, but I feel like English is actually more mathematical than we give it credit for. if we really dive into the structure of our language and things like that. And actually, mathematics is the language of the universe, and it's much more poetic and beautiful than we give it credit for. So I flip-flop back and forth. But what I enjoyed the most when I was pursuing math is working as a math tutor in the Student Services Center at SUU. Thank you. So I would work with students that came in, I'd usually work with them one-on-one. Occasionally there would be a group of students that was having trouble with one particular concept or another. But it was so rewarding to me to figure out how I could explain it or how I could reach them in a way that they would understand the concept, right? And that they would be like, oh, now I get it. Oh, negative numbers are like when you write a check for more money than you have in your bank account. Now you have a negative amount, right? And so I really have always loved the process of trying to make some concept or some idea clear to someone else.
I would like to comment on that because having been with you for a while, I think there are few people with more of a commanding understanding on multiple topics. And your ability to have that commanding understanding creates an ability to share understanding from multiple angles to someone else's mind. Whether it's math, English, poetry, I think there's multiple things that you have a very, very, very strong understanding. Some of my favorite teachers growing up were just so knowledgeable on the topic that I could pick their brain from multiple different angles and they could give me really cool answers. And I really enjoyed the command of their subject. And I'm talking to PhDs whose their whole lives they only studied the left adrenal gland, and it's not that specific, but they're just very, very specific in the thing that they have such a commanding knowledge of. And I love nerding out with those people because it is fun to just learn from them and understand. And I share with you a passion for teaching as well. I think it's one of you and I's core values. I teach med students year round, and you've done a wonderful job teaching our children, helping immersing them in the arts and in literature, and homeschooling them for a duration. And how cool was that? It's so cool to just
so cool
help them out.
I mostly homeschooled the kids because I was selfish and I wanted to teach them. I mean, I feel like they gained from it, but it was not ever like I feel like I have to do this and I don't want to. It was more of yes, this is what I get to do. This is something that I'm excited to get up in the morning and teach my children, like whatever it is that we're learning about. We're studying ancient Rome, or we're going to read Julius Caesar, and I'm going to, explain what the joke is. And, well, not Julius Caesar, but we did read As You Like It, and that one has more jokes in it. Julius Caesar isn't very funny, but, so I found it was rewarding for me, and hopefully it was useful to them.
As an academic, I consider you an academic. Your brain is where academia comes from. I don't consider myself that. I'm reasonably intelligent, but your brain is specifically designed for academia. But as an academic, I think, how was that, like pursuing a family and, raising children and maybe pausing on some of those, intellectual brain cells that you I don't know, how was that a challenge? What was that journey like?
Well, our listeners won't know, but you know this. There was a time when you were in medical school that I felt like I actually signed up for an educational doctorate program. Do you remember at NSU?
Yeah.
And I tried it for a little bit, and it just it didn't feel right, but I did have something in me that was always pushing me to work toward a goal. Shortly after that time, we moved to Jacksonville. When you were in residency, that was when I started writing my first novel.
Oh, yeah.
And so I feel like that drive never goes away. I just apply it in different ways. And I think everyone has maybe not the same drive for academia, but the same drive to like pursue what's of interest and value to that person. We all have that.
Yeah.
Right? We just have to figure out how to take that and then where to apply it in the ways that's going to serve us and the people we love as best, the best way that it can.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I poured it into my children for a while because that was where I felt it would best serve them. But then after a time, homeschooling wasn't it just wasn't what they needed most at that time. So we moved on to law school.
Yeah. What advice would you give? We'll come back to law school, but what advice would you give some of these mothers and women who are considering education, considering pursuing these various adventures, these various hero journeys, embarking on childbearing, embarking on education, etc.? Do you have any pearls of wisdom for them?
I think I would say, show yourself grace. Sometimes we tend to try and exact perfection of ourselves. And it doesn't help us do our best, actually. So if you're embarking on childbirth, for example, if you want to have your baby naturally without any interventions, that's awesome. If you want to go to the hospital and get an epidural, that is equally as awesome. If you start out, I really want to do natural childbirth, but it's not in the cards for you, that's also awesome.
Yeah.
So yes, choose the things that bring you joy and pursue them, but then be open for life to give you equal measures of joy in sidetracks or different experiences than the ones that you were expecting, maybe.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Often the pursuit of these things is a very type A type personality, and it's what it sounds like is you're advising us is to maybe be more flexible, be more neuroplastic with your journey, and allow for it to be imperfect sometimes.
Yeah.
And not the way that you thought it would be or planned, and just roll with the beauty of it.
I have a poem. I'm noticing that we have 1 minute left.
We have a little bit more, but yeah.
Okay. I have a poem that I think may address this.
Yeah.
Can I read it?
Please.
Okay.
Shaunna, over the years, has been a prolific poet. In fact, when we were dating, I think we broke up like 17 times. And each time we broke up, she would write a really powerful poem, which would often like tug at my heartstrings and get me thinking and fixing myself a little bit. So this is good.
So this poem is called Ordinary. And I hope it addresses that type A personality, that drive to go and accomplish those things, and helps us to give ourselves a little grace. Ordinary. Sometimes I remember that I am small and unremarkable. Not worthless, just ordinary. I think this is how a pebble must feel. Not magic, just small, nondescript, slightly asymmetrical. At first, I want to rage. How dare the universe disregard me? Or cower. How dare I demand to be regarded? But either way is a losing proposition. Either way only makes me smaller. So I try to face it without flinching. I am ordinary. Not the best at anything, but good at one or two. Like how a cup is good at holding water, a lamp is good at shedding light. And I'm good at hearing and holding space for a poem or a person. Not better than, just good at, like most anyone else. After all, I don't expect an elm to be extraordinary. I expect it to have bark and branches and leaves like every other elm. I expect it to provide some shade in the summer, to be good for hanging hammocks, to change colors in the fall. The cup and the lamp and the elm teach me that ordinary is a kind of relief, a lifting of the weight of expectations. Ordinary people still act, just reasonably, in a smaller way. I know a pebble can serve its purpose without expecting to be an opal. An elm can send down roots and send up branches and be an ordinary place of shade. But I also know one elm is not like any other. No other tree has a trunk quite this shape, or branches headed in these same directions, or leaves budding out on these same twigs. No other tree is quite like an ordinary elm tree. Then I'm quite content to be small, unremarkable, ordinary. I need not be anything more than I already am, slightly asymmetrical, holding water and space, shedding light.
Whoa. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shaunna.
You're welcome.
I think that is a really great note to leave this podcast on. We've gone from hero's journey to ordinary, but extraordinarily ordinary, and how
most heroes are ordinary.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's what we're supposed to be.
The push-pull of ambition and apathy is a balance, and finding that balance of peace and ambition. I won't call it apathy because that's probably not the right word. But peace, like just having being content, and then having a pursuit of something.
Yeah.
We've done a podcast on being happy or content, and this one is really great. I appreciate you sharing your story with us and sharing pieces of it. I think we're not done. I think I'd love to hear more about your law school and MBA journey, and maybe some tips, trips, and pearls from that space in another podcast. We can talk about business and legal stuff and fun things like that. But really appreciate you. This was a journey in the humanities space for me, just a little bit, which is really fun.
Excellent. That's my goal.
Thank you. Anything in closing?
Nope. Thanks for listening. Let's do it again.
Thank you for your poem. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, guys. I hope you learned some cool stuff from our podcast today. Shaunna, thank you for showing up and being awesome. And like and subscribe. Thanks.